Hello, everyone. Welcome to Sovereign Spirits, where we discuss the possibility of this system as being a type of trap where we get caught in a reincarnation cycle, partly perpetuated by so-called guides and counselors. And we focus on ways to transcend this cycle by remembering our true essence and using our intention in a willful and empowered way to manifest an afterlife as sovereign spirits.
I'm Wayne Bush, and I'm here with co-creator and co-host of the show, Julie McVeigh. Julie has experienced over 100 OBEs since 2019, which prompted her to interview nearly 100 people who've had either a near-death or out-of-body experience. She began to recognize a pattern of manipulation and deception in the accounts, which then led her to investigate the soul trap theory.
Yes, and Wayne first published his website, trickedbythelight.com, over 20 years ago in 2002, where he wrote about the light of the near-death experience being a deception, that souls are being recycled as energy. He revamped his website in 2012 and did his first public interview in 2014, referring to Earth as part of a prison system and loosh farm, language as a spell, the Gnostic demiurge and archons, life as a dream or illusion where we need to wake up from, and solutions on how to exit, such as going inward or quitting the game. In 2017, he pointed out many of the tricks and manipulations of the NDE and spoke more about the void or clear light as a viable exit strategy.
And so in April of 2023, Julie and I decided to combine forces, and together we began this channel to present our findings and further our research. And part of that is interviewing other researchers and experiencers. So today we're back with another guest. Please keep in mind as we do interviews that we may not be in complete agreement with everything our guests say and believe, just like our guests may not be in agreement with everything we say on our channel. But we do feel they may have pieces to this puzzle we're all trying to put together and have interesting and valuable information to share.
We are excited to have with us today Howdie Mickoski, author of two books relating to reincarnation. The first being Exit the Cave, Ending the Reincarnation Trap, and the second, Empty the Cave, Awaken the Spark. Hello, Howdie. Thank you for being here.
Hi, Julie. Hi, Wayne. Thanks for inviting me to your channel and to have what will hopefully be an interesting discussion today.
I hope so, and thanks for coming on. It's great to have you here, and congratulations on your book, Howdy. And I want to personally thank you for quoting me in Exit the Cave on the very first page, no less, and for mentioning the website in your interviews. So it's much appreciated.
Yeah, you probably don't know this, but I actually read your website in 2004. That was the
Wow,
first time I came across it. Yeah.
thank you.
So
It
I'm
was so long ago, I couldn't remember whether it was 2002 or 2004. And then I just listened to like my very first interview with Mark. I don't listen to my interviews. I can't stand to do that. But I was like, okay, let me see. And I said that I actually put my website up in 2002 and like on my hard drive, it shows 2002. But yeah, wow, it's amazing that you read it so long ago.
yeah.
Well, Wayne and I came up with some questions for you, so we will get started. The first question we have for you is, how did you come to know your information? Why do you trust it? And how did your work transition into the soul trap theory?
Yeah. So this will kind of, I guess, be a basic little small life overview, and then you guys can ask any further questions you might want from that point going forward. I grew up in Canada, a pretty normal guy, hockey player, and very popular in school. Went to university on a history degree. Life was pretty good up to like 2021. But I had a father who was a psychopath, and in my last year of university, stole all my money. So it took me 2.5 years to actually finish my final year and get through my degree. It was a very, um, as traumas go, it's maybe a 5 out of 10 on the trauma scale, but it was enough to throw a whole lot of questions into my life at a very young age. As soon as that ended, the university ended, my ex-girlfriend was murdered. So right away, within like about 2 or 3 months, I'd had these two things just kind of hit me very, very hard. And it began a change where I started to say, I no longer trust that if you just work hard and do things following some sort of script, that the world will look after you. That obviously was proven to be incorrect. I spent about 3 years in a really deep depression after all that. I just couldn't reconcile what was going on with the experiences. I was going inside because I was asking very detailed questions, and it's something a lot of people don't recognize. They say, well, I'm not really a spiritual person. I'm not meditating. I'm not doing this. And I said, well, have you had a divorce? Yeah. Have you really had to think about who you were and what you were doing during that time? Yeah, yeah. Well, that's it. That's spiritual work. It's
Sure.
examining yourself. And so that's what was going on without even recognizing it was happening. But I got to a point where I was in 1997 where I just was going to kill myself. I just hated being alive so much. And I just couldn't find a really good way to do it that would be not messy for the person who had to find me. And so I was in this just state of nothingness when a television program came on pyramid building. And it was like an instantaneous flash of electricity, of kind of like ancient Egypt has a secret, and you have to go find it. And it began 8 years of really hard work. But luckily, as opposed to the, I don't know, 2,000 books I read during that period, I was really lucky that first I met a Qigong doctor from Beijing. So I learned Chinese medicine and Qigong from him. Then met a Korean monk, Byung-Chul Park, and spent a year with him testing reality. He was really teaching what we would now call exiting the matrix, exiting the soul trap, but we didn't know it at the time because it was beyond my even capacity to even contemplate this idea, right? I was still looking to how do I stop my suffering and start enjoying my life again?
Yeah.
But he was teaching at a completely different level. Um, I stayed with him for about a year, and luckily, I wound up meeting three different medicine men, one a Blackfoot, one an Ojibwe, and one a Lakota. Spent time in all their reserves, in their sweat lodges, and learning native tradition for this time. The key part of the 8 years was testing reality. So that's what they really wanted me to do was find out if it was solid, which of course, in the course of the work, I found out it wasn't. It was absolutely transparent and not solid at all. Lots of experiences we can talk about if you want, from seeing parallel lives to watching myself time looping, all sorts of amazing things and mystical things. By the end of that 2004, when I'd finished my book on ancient Egypt, I thought I was pretty smart. I thought I knew a lot. And then the next year, I slipped and fell into a canyon in Alberta, just north of Johnson Canyon, just north of one of Canada's largest waterfalls, and died. And in that death experience, I was very lucky because Howdie dissolved. Howdie was gone. What and what a in an Asian tradition would call the realization of emptiness is what happened. Everything was dissolved away, and all that was left was the witnessing awareness to see that, oh yeah, because I had found that reality was fake, reality was an illusion, but I was real. The great spiritual mistake, right? Reality's real, or reality's fake, but you're real. And that experience showed that to be incorrect. However, in the next 10 years following that, I went through periods of deep clarity and deep confusion. I went through a 10-year illness that was impossible for anyone to diagnose, to fix, to do anything with. And it really wasn't until 2019 when two books came out, Falling for Truth, which was about these experiences of this time in my life, and a book on the world fairs and the lies of history of the 1800s, that my illness started to go away. And I began starting to do this, sharing information with people again, which I'd stopped for a long time. And then 2022, Exit the Cave just kind of was birthed out of all of that time frame, all of that and began the things that Mr. Park had been talking to us 25 years ago now started to make sense. That it took 20 to 25 years to actually understand what he was talking about and
Process
what
it
he
all.
was doing. And so that became Exit the Cave. And then the new book is not really like Exit the Cave 2. This book is the combining of really Falling for Truth and Exit the Cave into a totally new direction, which is how to how to see what is even more traps from the idea of exiting this place into what is maybe the only thing you really have to do. And there's the short version of a very bizarre life, and you're welcome to go wherever you want to go with that.
Well, if it's okay, I am curious a little bit about how you tested reality. If was this in altered states? Were you going out of body?
No. First of all, none of it was done with drugs. All of the teachers I had were very clear to that everything had to be done, yeah, with altering your state. And while I did have out of body experiences, and while I did have all sorts of dreaming experiences, the main ways of testing reality
Mhm.
was mostly through walking. Was through I was putting in at this time 12 hours a day of work. So I would do Qigong for an hour and a half in the morning, then I would walk for 2 to 3 hours, then I would sit and I would tree gaze, then I would come home and I'd have some lunch, then I would do some, I mean, the day was just one long continuous practice.
Mm.
I was a stand-up comedian at the time, so I was lucky in a sense that I only had to work on the weekends. So I had all the rest of my week free to
Oh.
just push myself to these extremes. So how crazy did it get, Julie? Well, it got to the point where story I tell quite often. I was sitting in my house and my girlfriend's house, and her sister, I guess, came over. I told, "Oh, your sister's coming over to see you." And she kind of looks at me, kind of, what? And then the door knocked. She opens the door. Sister comes in. She said, how did you know my sister was coming over? Well, I saw her drive. She parked right out front there. And she what? And she explained to me, but Howdy, that's a wall. For me, the wall didn't exist. I was literally just seeing outside completely. It had got to the point where there were times I had to hold on to chairs to make sure it was there when I sat down. Like literally, reality was absolutely transparent. I fully remember one of when I finally got the message, the world's an illusion. I was doing one of my walks. I was on the pathway. I was by a river, and the river became still, absolutely still, and the pathway and the ground started moving. And that's when I realized I have no clue what this reality is. Whatever I've been told it is,
Hmm.
it ain't that.
Was that pretty scary for you, or how did you react to that? Was it exciting? Like, oh, I finally got the answer. I got proof here for myself.
I mean, at first it was very clarifying because now I could realize, oh, this is what I know what these texts I've been reading are talking about. I was understanding things at a mental level. Now it's an experience. Now I know what that means. But so many of them were so strange. Like another one, I was walking in my mother's town, and I would always walk the same street and walk to her house, and I always wondered, I've never been on the street over there. I wonder if that street actually really exists because I've never been on it. I can't prove its existence. So I went over to walk, just turned really quickly to walk on the street, and as soon as I got there, it was silent, nobody, nothing going on. So I just stood there and I waited. One, two, three. All the doors open, all the people come out, the dogs start running on the street, the cars are going, the lawnmowers are going. It was like
Hmm.
Truman
they
Show.
just, yeah, something manufactured the street just to make me think this is real. And so, yeah, for a while it got a bit challenging. Thankfully, Mr. Park gave me some advice on how to handle that situation, which was a form of grounding. And once I regrounded, I was totally fine with the experience. So
Hmm.
that was easier to handle than, of course, the realization after when I realized, oh, I'm fake too. That's a really different thing to try to handle when you realize that you're not anything what you thought you were, and
You mean the Howdy
that takes a.
identity?
I'm sorry.
You mean the Howdy identity was fake?
Right.
Is
Well, the
fake.
whole thing, the body,
Just
mind,
awareness
thoughts,
is.
experiences, everything. Yeah, that it was all. It's all just a fictional character, right? I'm just a character in a video game. But on the experience, realizing that, oh, but actually there's this much deeper awareness. That's what I am. And that's actually, oh, everybody is this deep awareness where it's the same awareness, but these things are the trick. These are the projections. So I know we'll get into the matrix and talk about how I
How
come to
is
see it.
now you said you've been out of body, so you've probably
Yep.
seen some people say I see with my third eye, or obviously when you're out of body, you're not seeing with your physical eyes. So it's
No.
and maybe you've experienced while you're meditating or resting and your eyes are closed, you can see through your eyelids, I guess you might put it that way. So how does that differentiate with what you're sharing? Okay, I could see through the wall. I could see the water, stood still and the ground was moving. Those are two different things?
No, it's probably a similar, it's a similar aspect. It would be in those cases because it's still, in those cases, it's still an I, a me that is having an experience. So in those cases, instead of just this localized thing has exited the body form and can look back on it or look to other experiences like seeing through the wall, well, it's me in a different state of seeing, you might say, compared to reality. But the awareness in the canyon experience, which was non-local, it had no time, it had no space. It was, it
Hmm.
was, it was a me, but it was not individual to me either. I couldn't classify it as only me. It was just a total observing, and that's the best way of describing it. It was a total observing space. Because
Hmm.
when I had the death experience, when I fell in the water and realized I wasn't going to get out, there was just no way I'm going over the falls. And it was this beautiful moment of surrender, actually, because I just said, "Oh, I'm going to die here," and it's actually funny. Of all the places you could die, like this is, I would have ever thought this one? It's not on my list, right? And on that point of just, and I don't need to live, I don't need to continue. There's nothing for me to do. I was just watching my death, and it was going to be interesting. And as soon as that happened, it was like everything I thought of me was just gone. Like it
Hmm.
literally just dissolved.
Really
And
interesting.
even, yeah, thought was gone too. If information had to come, I called it as clusters of information would just like come up, burst, you might say, in front, and then
Huh.
it totally understood. The next cluster burst. There was no thought whatsoever, which I found interesting later that in
No.
a place where you most seemingly need to try to survive, your mind is thought is of no use there. So of what use is it in this world?
So would you say it was awareness and these clusters was a knowingness without, because you're saying there's really no thought of them, it just came and you knew.
Yeah, it's instant knowing,
Hmm.
absolute instant knowing. Um, and so that again, that was so interesting because Mr. Park had spent a lot of time with us, wanting us to, we would do these meditations every day. We didn't know what we were doing, of course. We would try to be still and make him happy, kind of, you know. And one day he comes in, he says, I want you to start thinking of nothing but nothing. What does that mean? What does he want? So he wants us to think of nothing? Well, no, he said he wants us to think of nothing. And so we spent days trying to understand what he even meant. How do you think of nothing but nothing? And it wasn't until the canyon experience when I realized, oh, this is what he was doing. He was wanting us to reach this point
Hmm.
where it's not that thought ends, it's the thinker goes away. And when the thinker doesn't exist, that's when thought stops. And so it was very interesting how he was teaching us, how he was going through just little exercises that he gave us had these secondary layers that we had no idea at the time what we were doing, but later on we figured it out. Um,
Hmm.
so I was really, really lucky to spend time with someone like this and see how he operated. I can give you another story if you like one, just for you and the viewers with him.
Sure.
Yeah. So these German girls came to visit him. They were about 20, 21, very young. Came flew all the way to Hawaii, didn't have a lot of money. Okay, they arrived, called Mr. Park out of his room. He comes out and said, "You Germans, all of you, Hitler, all of you Germans, all of you evil, you should all be killed, all of you, Hitler." And he went back in his room. And of course, we're like, well, that was interesting. So the girls are stunned now, like, well, we can't, what do we do? We've come all the way to Hawaii to see a crazy man. So they go to a cafe and they try to decide what they're going to do. And some guys come over to hit on them, right? To start saying, "Hi, how are you? Who are you?" You know, and this girl just she goes, "Hi, I'm Ingrid from Germany," and she bowed her head down. She realized she put her head down as if like, "I'm from Germany, please don't hate me." They went right back to the house. They came back in. We got Mr. Park out. Now, this time when it came out, she stood up like really straight and clear and said, "Hi, I'm Ingrid from Germany." And he said, "Hi, welcome to Hawaii." It was like right away from day one, he was not going to let anybody play any game around him. And that was, we had that problem because you could never lie to him. It was impossible. And so we learned, don't even try. Don't even try to trick him. He knows.
Right.
He knows everything. And so it was this wonderful opportunity that took me kind of to where we are to talk about this now.
Yeah, so well, after like all these experiences and all this time to reflect on everything that happened, like so what are your thoughts on who or what God or original sources, awareness, or are we independent spirits or consciousnesses that is like our own source with no beginning and no end? Big question.
I guess yeah, to share that one simply, I guess I've come to see it more in a very Gnostic Cathar mindset, which is that there was an original um, totality or an absolute reality that they know and call it, the pleroma. And in this pleroma, there was some call it an accident, some call it an error, where a secondary creator manifested its own world. We would know this as the demiurge, Yaldabaoth, Lucifer, many names, right? Who
Mhm.
created this reality. Um, the problem with this reality seemed to be from these texts and seemed to be from my experience of this world all the way through in the because I used to call this a suffering pit of hell. Now I call it a pit of distortion. I think that's a better term of which suffering is just a part of a much bigger, distorted set of lies. It seems like and this includes like the Popol Vuh, the Egyptian texts, creation was not alive this creation, our matrix couldn't get alive after being started, right? And so something had to be brought in from that outside world into this world to create the living, to create the spark. And in my world, I feel that was now I see it as it's a celestial fire was brought in.
Okay.
And the celestial fire got this thing powered up, got it running, but the demiurge was smart. The demiurge decided to trick the celestial fire by breaking it into millions of small divine sparks, little tiny pieces of fire. And to me, this is one of the great lies of the spiritual tradition, which is oneness. This term comes out all the time. We are all one. I'm one with the trees. I'm one with the rocks. I'm one. And I kind of came to realize there's two onenesses. There's the oneness of the divine spark, of the celestial fire, the originality of that, what you might call the awareness of what we are. And then there's the entire matrix, all of it, every single layer of this place. That's a totally different one. It is a oneness, but it's a different one. They're not the same one. So as soon as somebody says my totality and the rock are one, matrix has you. The matrix has you. And
Yeah,
the
it's
matrix is to
interesting.
me,
In the near-death experiences, a lot of the near-death experiencers describe the light as being a collective soul of all
mm,
humanity. So that's kind of that part of that one, where everything's interconnected in one. So that's like you're saying, the oneness, that false oneness, I suppose. Mhm.
right. And the challenge becomes, of course, is that because one is identified with their form and identified with their form's experiences, they instantly identify with other objects. And so they're identifying with the one of the matrix, not the one of that of which is beyond this. And that I think is where a big trick happens completely from the moment we come in here.
What are your feelings, if we can dig a little bit deeper on the pleroma or the true, I don't know what you would call it, true source or true God
Yeah,
that's outside of this? Is that a personal being or more of a neutral energy source? Or how would you describe this thing that is allowing this to happen, this
right.
distortion
They call him the
leading to suffering?
ineffable father sometimes, but
Yeah, and what's interesting to me was an article by Emil Cioran in the 60s, a Romanian philosopher. He called it he called the evil demiurge. And in his essay, he talked about an all good creator father would actually be unable to create because good has no ability to create. Good has no need to change anything. Good has no need to make anything different. He said only something evil could create. And so in this essay, the point was we live in this evil, awful world, but if there's a good God, why doesn't the good God fix it? Why doesn't the good God change it?
Exactly.
And in his essay, he would be saying it can't because it's all good. So in from that perspective, it sees no reason to have to fix anything. It would be like if you were with a new lover, you've just been dating like a week, you know, you're so excited and you're on the couch, you're together, it doesn't matter what else is going on in the world or anywhere. It's everything is perfect. Nothing needs to be changed. Nothing needs to be any different. And I get the sense that's what it's like outside of the pleroma. It's like this sense of, yeah, there's an error here, and it'll eventually it will correct itself. Eventually, it'll like just burn itself out,
But it
and which I
doesn't
think is
sound
what
that
will happen.
this ineffable father or this being is like comparable to a father or mother or a parent that has a child. Doesn't sound like the you can compare it in that sense.
Well, that's just how he was describing to get this idea of, well, why doesn't this absolute thing fix this insane mess, right? But if, yeah, as you guys would know, if you go into those texts, like the Apocryphon of John is presenting it as it's known as a father slash mother, what they name it. They don't give a name to the father, but they give the name to the mother, Barbello.
Mhm.
And this combined totality is how they created things which they did call suns, which again were male female combined aeons, right? These filaments of light. But in those texts, it's kind of describing like all that's being, I mean, I don't know, right? I don't know. There's no way I can know for sure. I'm just a guy here sharing some experiences from his life and giving
Sure.
some ideas for people to think about. I don't know.
I appreciate
But
that
it
honesty.
seems
A
like,
lot of
yeah,
people.
that matches very closely to how the ancient Egyptian creation myths are played out. They were always played out in male-female pairs that were at the same time were one, and in that one together, that was how a light or experience could happen. So it's very challenging to, yeah, try to reconcile from where our minds are. Well, then how did this thing, which every ancient text describes as a copy, a simulation, an error, whatever you want to call it, how does that come out of the perfect, out of the supposedly perfect absolute? And that is, I think, always where the ancient creation myths never give us enough information to be able to explain how do we go from A to B. The
Mm-hmm.
the presentation there is a bit simple.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And I was always intrigued by the Gnostic interpretation of all this and how, I mean, so much of what they said really seemed to hit home with me. Like, as far as this demiurge
Yeah.
creating, universe and this, evil type world that we're in. And the fact it could be like a matrix or a prison for our spirits. But the more I look at it, I start questioning, because when you read through the Gnostic text, it sounds so much more like more and more religion. Like this stuff
Mm-hmm.
is difficult to read. It's like so then I sort of like, well, how far do I want to believe it, right? Like they have some great answers.
Right.
Like, well, I'm going to trust their final interpretation of everything on it. And it's like I just don't know. Like you were saying, it's like you're just a man, you don't really know. And that's kind of where we're at too.
Yeah, we
Right.
play with the idea that maybe we are our own source, that, you know, we don't come from, I know you talk about the two onenesses, which is a possibility that there is this other oneness from which we originate, but what about the idea of just each of us, we're own individual source and not connected, really? That's a tough one
It's
for to
well, sure.
answer.
It's all it's it's all theoretically possible, and like you guys were saying, it's tough because the ancient texts are very good at describing the creation of the matrix after it's been formed and how all this
Right.
happens. They're
Right.
not very good at
Exactly.
describing where does the error matrix originate from.
Right.
Yeah.
That's where the and I've even translated some Egyptian texts personally by hand, retranslate, and even then it doesn't really explain it properly. So
Yeah.
it's
Which also leaves us
yeah,
with the
it's so
concern that it
challenging
could
because
happen again.
before my experience, like before I had my experience, I would have seen things really differently. But once you realize you're a character in a movie, like the thing I've always thought being a character in a movie, um, it changes everything of how you begin to try to differentiate this thing, which is just in a video game, and the thing which is beyond it, which is seemingly not technically in the video game, but
Mhm.
is linked to it in some way, and trying to explain for what's back there to what's going on here. That's where the challenge.
Did you have any other questions about
No, no, if you want to
this?
go and
Okay,
ask
I'll
the
move
next
on
question we
to
got.
the next question, which is related. So we were planning to ask you, have you discovered any information regarding why our soul spirits incarnated here? But it sounds like you're saying, okay, it came from this fire and then split up. And this question also relates to, is this a school? Everybody, well, not everybody, New Age community talks about this earth as being a school that we're here to learn for our spirits to evolve. Some talk about it as it's just pure entertainment. And others say it's a game or cosmic play or divine drama. I mean, you can speak to that a little bit. We heard a little bit.
Yeah,
Want to
sure.
mention?
I
Some
went
media.
through all of those as possibilities. I saw none of them as being able that I could verify as truthful. There were always holes in every one of those presentations, right? Once you start examining it.
Mhm.
Um,
It's not a very
and
good
once,
movie. If we volunteered as actors, it's like, why did I sign up for this part, and why is it taking so long? It's just so much suffering and horrific stuff going on. It's like it's like a horror movie.
yeah, it seems like, and again, this is just an opinion on where I'm at, but it seems like the fairy tale of Sleeping Beauty is a very, very powerful one. So is Narcissus, so is Prometheus. Those three myths slash fairy tales are all giving us pieces of information on what's really going on here. So in the Sleeping Beauty case, we can have the realization that what we truly are is what's asleep.
Mhm.
And this thing that we've come to believe we are is a projection, right? Narcissus is standing over the water and is projecting the image into the matrix reality, and then starts to believe the image over that which is doing the projection. But this realm can stay in its functioning as long as Sleeping Beauty stays asleep. And what's so interesting to me is why that metaphor is so powerful is that the thing in the character in the story now, the character in the video game has a part to play because Sleeping Beauty is asleep. Sleeping Beauty needs a prince to go and wake them up. And Sleeping Beauty is waiting for a particular kind of prince. She doesn't want any jackass to just come to the castle. She wants someone with integrity, clarity, courage, wisdom. So we, in a sense, have a bit of a job to become the kind of in the game movie character that our true Sleeping Beauty wants to awaken to. So that metaphor, whether it's actually true or not, seems to, when I share that idea with other people, that seems to something clicks into them that makes total sense to them because all the discussion is always how does this thing wake up? The Howdy thing is not seeing clearly. The Howdy thing needs to see how the government works, what's going on here, what the financial system is, what. And once I realized, well, no, Howdy doesn't need to wake up at all. He's Neo Anderson in the Matrix. It's the Neo who's in the pod, who's got the wires attached to him. That's the thing that has to wake up. They are actually two different things. One is a projection, one is something more truthful that is in a state of, is in a coma. So all of, to me, those symbols have helped to realign a shared metaphor of seeing if other people can run with the metaphor and go a little deeper and see if that actually holds truth or not.
And so Prometheus fits in because he like stole fire from the gods and gave it to mankind. Then is that the divine spark that you're talking about
Yeah,
that we and
right. The divine spark, and then there's then Zeus slash Lucifer punishes Prometheus, right, with this endless task of rolling the rock up the mountain, which would be a reincarnated life. The rolling of the rock, going up, the rock rolls back, you do it again, you do it again, you do it again. And in the course of my experiences where I found out I'm pretty sure I've lived thousands of lives in this individual body, that it's not just one life, go to the next life, go to the like a physical, it seems like I'm living this life hundreds, thousands of times, which would
Mm,
make sense, even if someone wanted to say, well, this is a place of experience. God wants experiences. Well, even if that's true, then God would want 10 million run-throughs of this body. Why only have one run-through? You've got really limited experiences. So,
mm,
and same thing if those who say it's an experiment. Well, if it's an experiment, then this thing needs to run millions of times in order to get the kind of data set you would need to be able to make any kind of observation of what you've watched. So the idea that it's one life, one experience, one whatever through, that I think is again part of the trick that's here to really scare people. Like if you make one mistake, if you just make one little error, it's
mhm.
all over. But if you realize I got 10 million lives, I've made lots of mistakes, like lots of them. It's okay. You
Yeah,
just
you
keep
mentioned
going.
that you experienced your parallel lives or some of your parallel lives.
Mm. Yeah, when I was wow, I was 99, I guess. So I'd already had some out of body experiences where those ones where you see yourself sleeping or are able to see yourself from an external. But I was walking on the street in Calgary, and I had been on a bachelor auction date the day before. It was for breast cancer research, I think. So you can't say no to, going into something like that. The woman who bought me was a drunk. I can't describe it any more than this was as an alcoholic person as you could possibly imagine. And it was just an awful evening. I did whatever I could to, because she spent a lot of money for this date, and I'm trying my best to, function with this person. The next day, I was walking on the street alone, and she had asked me a question that I didn't properly answer at the time. She had said, "Why did you get into all this spiritual work anyway? It sounds like a waste of time."
Hmm.
And my answer now to on the street became, because if I didn't, I would be dead now. In that moment, the entire street went away, and I was on a road where there'd been a car accident. And a truck had smashed into a small car. There was a guy walking around who was obviously the driver of the truck, and he was very confused, but he was okay. I looked into the car, and there was a woman in the car who was badly damaged. She wasn't dead, but she was seriously hurt. And I noticed there was a third car turned over in the ditch. So I'm going to say I floated because I didn't really walk. I floated over to the car. I looked inside. Oh, there's a driver in the car, and that driver's dead. And when I looked closer, oh, that driver's me. And it was an instantaneous knowing of in another reality, whether it's a parallel reality, looping reality, at this
Mm,
exact time, I just
mm,
witnessed my death in a different reality. And then through some journey work and through some of the things the natives taught me, I was able to track that entire life. And I've done this with a few other similar lives I've had, which have all been quite logical. Like nothing has been uh, totally crazy. A few little tiny changes in my life would have easily produced the kind of lives I had seen. And it's also a very humbling experience when you start to kind of realize that, um, yeah, there's so many experiences of this thing going on. I'm really not as special and important as I thought I was, you
mm.
know?
If I had another question relating to
Yeah.
our spirits or who our true essence, if we're back in, let's say, a pod or we're asleep, our trueness,
Mhm.
would that suggest then that we're certainly not all knowing, we're not, maybe we are eternal, maybe not. But doesn't that suggest that we're learning, that we are evolving, would you say?
No, if these some of these ancient texts are correct, and the feeling is that they probably are, the idea that Wayne had on his site long ago that something truthful in a sense was tricked in here, that there's a trick being played to enter this reality. Like the Cathars were quite clear on how that happened. They have two completely different stories of how the divine spark entered into this reality. One was just an outright asking of God, and God said, "Okay, take one in," and then He shut the doors. The other one, Satan came or Lucifer came and tricked the souls to come in. Um, so my sense, my honest feeling now, the only thing that the the true awareness has to realize is that it got tricked, and that, how to say this, only that which is true can exit the matrix. Anything false will have to be left behind. The problem is that thing in the pod has identified totally with false, totally with something, not with the no thing that it is, because what can trap emptiness? What can contain emptiness? So all that's going on is that thing back there is being tricked to think that it is actually something, that it is important, that it's got things it has to do, things it has to improve, things it has to, karma it has to burn, and then projects a reality, this thing, in order to have all of these experiences that it doesn't actually need.
Mhm.
What a trick.
Sounds like it's still learning, but we can move on to,
Well, it
did you
also
have another
reminds me of
question?
the movie Wizard of Oz, where the little frail man behind the curtain and he's projecting this, and they're all seeing it, and then they think it's real, but it's just a projection. And then, of course, in the end,
Mm,
Dorothy like clicks her heels, and they say, "Oh, you always had the power within you," but she sets this intention to go home,
mm.
and then she wakes up from this dream. And the same thing, like with Alice in Wonderland, I think she was dreaming, but yeah, probably ought to move on.
Yeah,
Yeah,
again, I think that's the great message in all of this that because a lot of people when they hear me talk, of course, you'll hear these, he's so negative, he's so depressing. He's isn't this guy, and it's the
We get that.
opposite. The underlying message is that you have all the power. The deepest
right,
truth of you has more power than you can imagine. The
right.
problem is it's been this giant disconnect to everything that's not your power. And unfortunately, you have to go through you have to break all those walls before you can hit the power. So it sounds really negative, but actually
Mhm.
it's really positive at the end. You just have to
We
get there.
we get that all the time too. And we actually took the trouble to write a statement of empowerment to these people with what basically you just said was that you're calling us negative, but yeah, it's very positive and it's empowerment. So how's that negative? Yeah.
As
So
you know, most people have one goal, and that is to feel better. And all they want is people to tell them everything's going to be okay, to be comforted
Right,
and to feel better. And this message is not doing that. This message is, like I say,
right.
it's empowerment, and it's different.
yeah, exactly. So I guess the next question we have for you is, what have you learned about these so-called guides and counselors that we're told, when you go to the light and there's these guides and counsels and stuff, and then hypnotherapy sessions, there's these guides, or in also pre-birth memories where the guides are like trying to plan our lives for us or with us, and like any idea like what type of entities they are, like whether they're archons or where do they come from, what do they want from us?
Yeah, the easiest answer for that is 98% of it is all some kind of trickster, all some kind of thing that is manipulating something to keep this thing
You
going.
feel like it's a Maya or illusion, like it's illusion, like it's a hallucination that we are projecting from within? Like, are they even real? Is
Yes,
it all? Uh-huh.
yes, yes. Or you might say it's a combined projection, a projection from this thing itself, because it's, in a sense, it's projecting, and then we are projecting back a second. You need the two lasers for the hologram, right? So one is coming, one projection laser from us, one from the matrix itself.
Mm.
So we are interacting with the projection. And because we are still projecting out, we're in one sense manifesting the projection. And I see these beings the way we would classify AI. that they are the equivalent of like a giant computer program. And
Mhm.
so they they run on a very specific scale. And I think anyone who had a lot of out of body experience who's interacted with these beings, they kind of I think they start to get the sense that you can predict what they're going to do, what they're going to say, and what their next step is because they're literally operating from a box of code when you as a traveler have the opportunity to go outside of a box of code.
Mm.
So that's of course the possibility of moving through them. Now, there are some things that I would classify as true help, as true things from I would claim outside the matrix. Um, but they're not always in the form we wish they would be. It's not some wonderful being of light who's going to come and talk to us and tell us everything. They're going to be similar to David and Jennifer in the movie Pleasantville, where they come from the outside world into the completely different black and white realm and are seemingly giving information that makes total opposite, no sense, or it will be very subtle. The other place that I trust now, because I used to trust, I mean, spirit guides, power. I mean, I had everything, right, when I was younger. We all get into the new age game somewhere along the way, and you have to pull yourself out of religion and you have to pull yourself out of the new age. Um, but I've come to see still that if you can connect with the deepest core of nature, whether nature itself, a tree, a rock, an animal, because they're as trapped as we are, one way or another. They're also in the suffering pit, and so I feel there's a potential connection that if you're willing to have empathy and kindness for them and offer your assistance to them, they'll offer your assistance back to you. But I guess this from my native teaching, it was very clear that, they taught me right away, you couldn't even pick a flower until you've gone and talked to the flower and asked, does it want to leave? Does it want to leave its spot? Does it want to not be there anymore? If it said no, you just have to leave it. You have to respect its wishes. And so I think there are these places where help is actually available. Um, but yeah, 98% of the time, it's something that is going to present the form or the idea or the concept or whatever we wish or hope, and that's what's going to be projected. So unfortunately, most near-death experiences that I read and listen to, I consider that to be an outside force projection that is just designed to get the consciousness of that individual soul to agree to whatever those other beings want them to do. And they'll just go through a checklist. They'll go through one, two, three, like as you guys have seen, and they'll just, and eventually one of the things in the checklist, the person will say, yes, okay, I'll go back, I'll do this, I'll go into that
Right.
life. And that's all they're doing. Yeah.
What are they getting from us, like energy, or what is it? Why are they doing that in your estimation?
Again, I can't know for sure. I mean, the idea of loose energy makes complete sense. The it would make sense to me that if you have a simulacra this huge with this many layers, this many dimensions, this many whatever, that it must take a massive amount of power to keep going. So it would make sense logically if you could get the characters in your video game to generate the power that the video game needs to keep going. So somewhere I think that's really the whole thing, that if the power stopped being able to go into the matrix would shut down. And if the matrix shut down, because everything in the matrix is false, that means all of these archons, all of these demonic beings, all of these things would, in a sense, die because they're dependent on the matrix. Anything that wasn't from the matrix. This is why I think, to me, this metaphor of outside and inside is so important, because if the matrix just literally was turned off, it had no power, then there's no possible way that anything from outside could be in any way trapped anymore either. That power source is partially there to trap the things that are from outside. So to me, that's the underlying nature of the game, is keep the power source running. And yeah, I'll leave
That
it
was
there.
one of the reasons early on, like I was trying to think of like, okay, what are the solutions? Like I'm presenting this fearful theory
Mhm.
for a lot of people. And it's like, well, I got to give them some kind. And so I thought, well, yeah, quit the game. Like in the movie War Games, like the only winning move is not to play. So if you just take away their power, then the whole
Right,
thing dies. Yeah.
exactly. Because to me, that was one of the things that was my huge change a couple of years ago. I still believe for a long time, I don't know, you guys can ask, why could I possibly kept thinking this, that this could improve, that this could be a better world, that if we just did a
Sure.
couple of things, if I just did this, if I helped here, And
Right.
finally, when I was writing Exit the Cave, was the realization, oh no, this is a crap hole. It's always been a crap hole. It'll
Right.
never get better. It
Designed
will
that
only
way.
get
It's
worse.
designed to be that way.
Right. So as soon as I stopped trying to project all of this energy out there to fix or save the world and just say, oh no, all you've got to do is transform the thing here, redistribute the energy here, which is not what they want. They want the focus there as
Mhm.
opposed to just make sure it's all here and maybe in a very small environment with a few people or a small little space. And I've seen from myself and others that have been doing this tremendous transformation. But as soon as tries to go deeper, bigger, nothing will work. And I know someone will say, well, they'll have some answer to that, but just think of how many trillions of prayers to God have gone on in the history of our world, asking for world peace to make it better, and it gets worse and worse and worse. So maybe the answer isn't that way. You save the
Right.
world by saving yourself.
Yeah, and some people say this is like a consensus reality that we're taking part in. And if you're one voice out of 8 billion voices or however many there really are, yeah, good luck with changing everybody else's mind. It's like I feel like if you started up a game of basketball with people and they're like being ridiculous and they're hitting you and fouling you, and it's like you don't like the game, you quit. You walk away and say, I'm sorry, I don't agree to playing this game anyway.
Hmm.
Or how the value can, was talking with Wayne and Julie before we got on, before we started the recording, but I bumped into Wayne's material around 2004, his original website. And I read through some of it because there was only two people at the time who had this kind of website of this is like a really shitty realm. Yours
Who's the other
and
one?
someone named Tom Montauk. He was the other one that kind
Okay.
of had a bit of that. Yeah. But I remembered your site, but I still was unable. I liked it. It was interesting. I digested some of the material. I saw how it related to Mr. Park and some of the native teachings, but I couldn't just, fully embrace it at that time. But when I started going back to work on Exit the Cave, and it's like, oh, here's this website. Wow, this is incredible. And as I started reading it, wait a minute, I remember reading this a long time ago. And then I read this site 20 years ago.
Well, I took
So
it down
so
like
your
after a few
website, in a
years.
way, affected me and my work 20 years later,
Hmm.
even though
Planted the
it maybe
seed.
didn't have the effect. So again, this one person doing little things can actually have tremendous ripple effects.
True.
Yeah, I mean, I actually we got nobody. I got like maybe one email from somebody, and I just took down the website after like a few years,
Yeah,
3, 4, 5 years. And then
yeah.
when 2012 came around, it's like, okay, what if the Mayans really are right? I got to get this information out there. So I worked
Yeah.
real feverishly, and I got it up early in 2012. So I fleshed it out much more in 2012. So when we went back to read it later, it's probably would make more sense because I
Yeah.
added like so much more material to it. But yeah, you can plant a seed. That's all
But
you do.
I was ready for it. That was the thing. I was finally
Yeah.
ready. I had finally
Right.
burned out the last bits that said I
Hmm.
can still do something that will, and finally, no, no, you
Hmm.
can't. It's
Yeah.
that's the great deception. What's the George Carlin say it? If you're trying to get a solution, you're part of the problem. And it's been the one of the most liberating things I can experience to just say, right, it can't
Yeah.
be fixed. It's a pit that's just gonna, well, it's I think it's not just burning out. I think a new simulation is gonna be started, which is gonna be, if you can
Mm.
imagine, even worse than this one.
All right.
And I'm just gonna watch it go.
Well, we'll move on to our next question. It's
Sure.
related to what we've been talking about. Anything more you want to share about the construct of the matrix? And of course, ET technology is quite interesting. The love bombs that we see used, obviously the mind wipes, maybe soul capturing. If there's anything that you've learned that you want to share.
It's all of those things are yeah, they're important for people to see because obviously once you see there's a memory wipe, the memory wipe indicates, well, it can't be a place of learning because if you don't remember anything, then you have nothing that you, there's no memory to build anything off of. But generally, it's presented that this memory wipe is all about not remembering your last life. That's what they're trying to get you to forget. I've now come to think, no, they're trying to make you forget what happened after you died the last time. That the real horror, the
Mm,
real suffering of the experience is when the archons eat your energy. And that's what the memory wipe wants to forget. That however traumatic this experience is, that's 100 times worse.
mm,
And because if we could remember all those times, we would be done. 100% we would do whatever it takes to be finished with all of this. And that's also our great, again, our great power to see that, how to say this, we can be eaten because again, it's all about us. It's not about them. It's because we're still identifying as being someone that can be eaten and that something can have authority over us, right? This
mhm.
idea that there's
Right.
still something out there that can control and have power. And I left this little piece at the end of the third chapter of my book, which is, and I know you'll get to this, you're asking how you exit the matrix, but you, in a sense, you don't really exit the matrix. You become such an annoyance to the demiurge that the demiurge can't have you around anymore. That you are literally of no use anymore to the
Hmm.
demiurge.
It sounds like the Borg
That
in Star Trek too. They only
mm,
want perfection to assimilate, I guess. And I'm not that big of a Star Trekkie, but
right. So again, that idea of the greatest way to live in an unfree world is to live as free as possible, and it becomes an act of rebellion, right? That idea from Albert
Mm,
Camus, and that seemed like that's the switch when it's how do I get out as opposed to how do I become such a liberated thing within the matrix itself that having access potential of total power, the demiurge now says this thing is too powerful to have in here. Let's get it the hell out. And you could say, well, you're wasting your power then. Why wouldn't you go and save hundreds of people? And again, that's what the demiurge would want. They would want to go back, waste the energy, as opposed to every time a being exits, every time a being is no longer, like Wayne just said, is no longer is done with the game, is not playing anymore. There's no power being sucked off anymore. Every little bit of power means the dream is having more and more difficulty going forward. Now I'll finally get to Julie's question from before. It took me a while to get here, but my feeling is why this why this new simulation or simulacra is being built, this 5D, new 5D ascension reality, which will be depth 5D, deeper into quicksand, is
mhm.
many of these souls, many of these sparks have left, are no longer in the matrix. This place is getting less power. It needs to do something to increase its power, but it can't bring in more divine sparks. It's got a limited amount what it can do. So it's gotten very, very smart. It's realized that if this is in a sense, the computer terminal, and this is the thing that it's taking the energy from, well, it's automatically going to lose energy in the transfer between the two. So, let's put the machine and the being together so there'll be no energy loss. So they no longer have
Huh.
to get any more souls or anything. You've got more than you need to just do this. So all of this so-called transhumanistic movement, merging with the AI, the chip in your mind, it has nothing to do with this simulation. It's literally preparing the passageway to the next one, which will be an even smoother harvesting of the energy so the system can keep operating with less and less. Because once this change happens, I think, as this change is happening, there's a great door that's open, like right now. Like there'll be this switch over where you might say it has to turn off its power for a while before it turns on the new one. And there's a great opportunity right now for everybody who's clear and aware to make a decision that I don't want to be in that one. I don't want to be in this one. I don't want to be in any other garbage simulation. I'm just, whatever home is, that's where I'm going to. And I think that opportunity is literally available to everyone right now. And I think that's maybe why this topic is getting so popular now. Somehow people feel like there's an opportunity. This subject is true and there's an opportunity. And I get the sense, well, I guess that's why I'm still talking about this stuff and haven't just gone to live in a mountain somewhere and just left all this behind.
Mm.
Oh, nice.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
then
for
this is a
sure.
good segue into the final, well, basically the final question for the most part is what do we need to do at death to avoid this reincarnation cycle, like you're saying about getting out? I mean, what is it? Is it a level of consciousness at death, or a use of intention, or afterlife affirmations relate to our ability to exit? Like, should we go to the void? Is there importance to ideas such as healing, soul retrieval? I mean, what do we do?
My feeling now is if you like get to the other side, if you hit the white light or if you hit any of those things, it's too late. It's
Mm.
too late.
Right.
That the work has to be done now. And this is the opportunity where you can not just know what you are, because that's still in a mental state. You become what you are. That's the change. Once you have become the truth of what you are,
Mm.
this place really can't hold you. And therefore, it doesn't matter what trick would be thrown at you, you just wouldn't accept it. You just wouldn't accept it as real. You would know it's no matter what you're getting thrown at, it's a projection. So that experience of emptiness, it's not the exit out of the matrix, but to me, it's the doormat that the soul will wipe its feet on before it goes through the door. It's like that what I guess what you'd be calling the void. That void is like this, which is
Mm.
not void. It's no
Everything.
thing and it's everything at the same time, right? It's these, yeah, it's these both sides together. Just everyone likes the everything side. They're not as excited by the no thing side. But that's like it's you're still in the matrix though. You're still in it because as Karl Rand's a German gentleman explained to me once when I was over at my house, it was as as long as even if you're in the void, in the nothingness, and you're experiencing the nothingness, there's a person or a thing experiencing the nothingness. That's two, that's duality, and eventually something will happen to generate a three, and you're back into the matrix. So there actually has to be the extinguishing of the experiencer in order to end the experience of the matrix. So
Mm.
swinging that around to the question, it becomes this sense of rooting out every little piece that the matrix could still use to, you might say, pull you back. Do you still have something you want to do? Do you have something that you still love? Do you have something you still hate? Do you have something that you still, is there still something that could be put on a plate in front of you?
Mm.
Like if somebody says, hey, remember that girl you didn't date when you were 20? Well, how about we'll give you that life where you can now live with them and you'll be married and you can have this. Oh, and if somebody might take that, somebody might do something else, somebody might want revenge on somebody, someone might want to, well, we'll give you the chance to experience all the knowledge that's possible in the universe. We'll set you up in this beautiful cloud and you can,
You got to let go
if,
of all the attachment
Well,
and unfulfilled desires.
right, if
how do you
any,
live as a spouse or as a parent and at the same time detach from that in a sense, ultimately say, okay, I'm not attached to this and I won't be controlled by this after death?
it's once you know that there are no children and there are no spouses, all
But how do
projection.
you live practically with your spouse and at the same time know that
Right,
there are no spouses?
right. It's a sense of realizing, but I'm an actor on a stage play, and there's a particular things that this human character is supposed to do. And so that's part of self-definition. We figure out what this self is supposed to be, the material self first, so that the material self can live the way it's supposed to, almost as a type of robot most of the time, and no longer us fighting the robot. Things need to be done, dinners need to be cooked, things need to
Wood, carry
happen. The
water.
garden
Can
needs to be
one
tilled.
feel
Yeah,
compassion and empathy and still have that ultimate
right,
detachment? Is that possible?
right. Because that's a key Schopenhauer philosophy, which is once you find out you're living in a world of suffering, that means all the beings within it are suffering. So the greatest response to that is extreme empathy, which is different than compassion, because compassion is, in a sense, already there's a sense of it's something wrong there, it's bad. But empathy is we are both suffering
Right.
creatures together in our own
Mhm.
ways. It's a very interactive thing. So just because I know they're all projections doesn't mean I don't have. In fact, I have more empathy than I could have ever had before. You can't really have detachment without empathy. They kind of both go together. And so it's easy to start living completely and totally when now the fear is gone. Because prior, when I still thought this was 100% real, then there was always something that could, oh, this could hurt me. This could change me. Oh, what would happen here? Oh no, this is, there's always something to be afraid of. And once you're, well, here, I'll explain it. The problem, the trick becomes to see that, okay, you're an actor on a stage with everybody else. We're all actors on a stage, but we eventually move to being the sitting in the theater, watching the stage play,
Mhm.
not in one sense identifying what happens, but the character is still on the stage. That's people somehow think, oh, when you go into the audience, then the character you've left and you're just some sort of disembodied consciousness. Well, no, the
Mhm.
character just continues. It's just you're remembering, oh yeah, I'm just an actor in a play. And so what happens is not critical anymore. It's not, I don't need to win anymore. I don't need to succeed anymore. I don't need to fear losing, or when before that was my whole life. My whole life was making sure I'm succeeding, making sure I'm not
Right.
embarrassing myself. And all of a sudden when you can pull that away, and then you can just, what needs to be done in this moment, what needs to be said in this moment, right? You do that, you say that, you be as helpful and as of value as possible, but what happens to it is beyond my concern or beyond my control.
Yeah, you don't want to be so engrossed in the movie that you forget who you are while you're watching the movie. Like, oh, wait a minute, I
Right.
paid money to come see this movie, and I got so wrapped up in the story, I forgot about it
Yeah.
all. And so, would you
And
consider
I'm,
that the void that you're talking about, which I guess the Tibetan Buddhists would talk about the true nature of your
yeah,
being? Do you call that the clear light? Like,
clear
there's a
light. Yeah.
difference between the white light that the near death experiencers go to and the clear light, right? That's kind of
Right.
what I found. You agree with that?
I would agree totally, because I've also done some Dzogchen Buddhism,
Hmm.
which again, yeah, their idea is to reach this clear light, which is really the void, with the idea being that if you don't have everything done yet when you die, but you have this training to instantly go to the void, that if you're not sure what to do, well, that's the best thing to do, at least according to a Dzogchen Buddhist. That's the least likely, that's the place where it's the least likely they can get at you. And you have might say you have some time to kind of figure out where you are.
Mm.
Because that's a challenge that anybody listening to this would obviously probably recognize, that when death actually comes and the shift goes from body to no body, it's going to be confusing. If you're not prepared for it, if you haven't been in that place, it's going to be very confusing. And so when you're confused, you're easier to manipulate. And like you talked about the white light, which is really just a gigantic, powerful feeling of love, which the average person who's lived a life on suffering earth is just begging for some love
Mm.
their whole life to feel better. And all of a sudden they get more than they can imagine. So that's why I'm saying, if you get to that point, if you die and you're there, it's going to be really hard to reject it,
Yeah, that's what
because
the Tibetan Book of Living and Dying suggests, is that you have
yeah,
to work when you're ready, you have
right.
to recognize that clear light before your death,
Right.
because
Yeah,
it's
so it becomes literally automatic, that it's just there isn't even a there's no it's no thought. It's automatic. You're in the void,
Right.
and then hopefully you're wherever the next point is from the void becomes very, very clear at that point. So I think that's why they called it clear light.
Mhm.
because it's not necessarily a light.
Clarity.
It's an awareness that has clarity, has this, similar to the way I was talking about these clusters of information would just come up and it was
Mhm.
automatic. I think that's a symbol of what the void would be like if you are totally disengaged from mind and form and body. That information should be instantaneous, and then it's just the sense of following it.
Now, once we're out, how do we make sure we never get ourselves into this position again and have these mind wipes? I mean, if it happened once, can it happen again?
I hope not, but something brought I guess the only hope would be that when we returned, because again, Howdy's not getting out, right? Howdy doesn't go anywhere. Howdy's like a car that this awareness is borrowing. And eventually the car's going to just get parked in the driveway and kind of a one time remembered, yeah, I enjoyed that car for a while. It was great to have, and I'll be forgotten. This thing will be forgotten. Um, so actually, to me, exiting the matrix from our standpoint is the most selfless thing we can do, because the thing that will actually exit the matrix is not us. And we are spending all of this time and energy, if it's really going to happen, for, we might say, a truer form of us, but not the thing we've ever known. What
Mhm.
happens after that? I mean, I don't know. And we never got to that stage with Mr. Park. Mr. Park, he had three stages of teaching, and he kind of, none of us were at stage three, so he never told us what the third stage was, which I would
Mm.
assume is this final part, but he did give us a clue. And the clue was, you listen for the cosmic sound that pulls you home. He said there's a particular sound, and it's interesting because in the book Path of Masters by Julian Johnson, right? He also spoke of the same thing, of this. He called it, I can't remember what he called it, something like the cosmic sound, that
Mm.
we've been so used to our eyes or feeling that the ears are the one sense in this body that we have usually pushed to the bottom. And it
Mm.
was kind of like Mr. Park wanted us to turn that around so that the sound becomes the main focus of how we're going to navigate in the after death reality.
Mm.
A
Interesting.
lot of religious teachings, it all started with sound and before
Yeah.
light.
Right.
And it's interesting.
Spoke into
Mm.
existence.
It's not, is it the sound Om or something like that, or something completely different? It's more of an inner
No,
knowing.
he described it, and I've heard it a
The
few
real sound?
times.
Like you're
Yeah,
saying, the clear light is not really a light or
no, it's like he described it like a hum of a computer, but very light,
okay.
but not like tinnitus. Tinnitus has, when you have that, when the ear ringing's there, there's like, you can have sort of an electrical sound, but when I've tapped into certain times with Mr. Park, it was different. It was totally unique. And I don't know whether it's something from outside the matrix that's like a homing signal, or if it's like the core energy source. So I don't know if it's like, oh, this is the sound, and you get to the final point and then you realize that's the last thing I have to let go of.
Mm.
It's like the battery of the computer symbolically. It's like, okay, that's the last thing I have to go
To me,
past.
it
I'm not
almost
sure what
sounds
he
like it's
meant,
still
but
external. It still to me sounds external, and I'm a little leery
yeah.
about that. I want to
Yeah.
be
No,
with it.
I would think at some point the sound would go too, right? Because it's also projection. So at some point, but
Mm.
the idea for him was, if you're relying on feeling, sight, any of these other things, probably the trap is easier. But if you're relying on sound, I don't know. I mean, you guys have looked through thousands of near-death experiences. Has there ever been a near-death experience that's only been related as sound, where there's been no other sense experienced by the person, where only
Not
sound?
that I'm aware of. I've been to a lot of near-death meetings where they actually were talking about this sound, like, and we brought up tinnitus, but it's not that. And it's like they called it like a clarion call or something like that.
Mm.
But
Mm,
but no, I'm not aware of any experience that was just sound only. I mean, I think even like blind people and deaf people, once they have their experience, they can see or
Yeah.
hear, so that's, I don't know.
It was just one of the many things I've taken out of my time with him, which I don't fully understand, right?
Mhm.
And it reminds me too of various sweat lodges because once you're in the sweat lodge, all that's left is sound. You're in complete darkness now. You are
Right.
all that's left is the sound of the songs and then eventually the sound of your own prayers. So again, it was from just working through these experiences of my life, well, maybe the sound has more importance in this work than we've ever thought it was. We put all our focus on these other things, but we haven't really put the focus on sound, and maybe that's what we should do.
Well, there's a theme that runs through a lot of songs and esoteric movies and things like that. Like, and it's more of a like a wind, like the wind in the willows,
Mm,
and the great god Pan, they call it, and this the flute, and it's like you're waiting for the piper to call you. But to me, like the
right.
piper is the devil. But like you're saying, if there's a false and a true, then maybe that's the false one, and there could be a
Mm,
true one if everything is a copy.
Right.
It's just so hard to know.
I know. Or like the movie They Live, where the cover was being put out by that frequency
Oh,
from the
the signal.
tower. And so
Mm.
he had to eventually blow up the tower to stop the frequency, which again is a type of sound. So
Sleep,
that's why I
sleep.
wasn't sure whether it's a sound that in a sense you follow like truthfully because it's totally there, or if it's the last part of the matrix that if you go to
Mm.
there, you're literally now you've hit the end point, that sound is literally the end point. And if you can turn away from the sound, there's nothing left to turn away from. Like that's it. I'm not sure which it is, but something tells me
Yeah.
that's highly likely true.
Well, Howdy, we're reaching the end of our time here, but we wanted to leave, the last words with you. If there's anything else you feel is important, that you wanted to add.
Um, I guess no, the only thing I wanted to just say again is that people like you guys have really put a lot of understanding into people and to really start questioning what is this reality? That program that people had, God is love, it's a school, everything's gonna be okay, we're gonna just it's all karma, to
Merge with
finally
sword.
start yeah, beginning this process of like that might all be a load of crap is been so powerful to help so many people begin to start saying, okay, back to square one. I really don't know what's going on here. So what an opportunity to step back and start fresh again. And that there's a few people out there that are working very hard to try to share these ideas and get people to think. And I think that's all I wanted to share at the end was just my
Thank
own
you.
thanks for the work you guys do to
And
get
you're one of
people
those
to
people
think.
too. You're one of those people too. So we thank you so much, Howdy, for being here today and sharing with everyone. And we'll put your links in the video description. Thank you,
Thanks.
everyone, for watching. This has been Wayne Bush and Julie McVeigh with Sovereign Spirits.
Yeah, and if you enjoyed this discussion, of course, please give it a thumbs up. If you like this type of content, please subscribe, share the information, click on the bell icon so you're alerted to future videos. And we hope you're having a wonderful day or evening, wherever you may be. And always remember to
Stay
stay sovereign.
sovereign.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.